myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Good morning, welcome along to NUFC Matters. I'm delighted to say we're back with George for those were the days after a bit of a sabbatical. George, great to have you back on, mate.
Well, I'm delighted.
Doing a lot of other shows, but this is a great show, this, and I know a lot of people have been waiting for this to come back. So, how are you doing, mate?
All right, and very much appreciate the good wishes from people who know I've been struggling with my eyes and still am, and also to the NFC Matters friends like John Allen, who've sent me magnifying glasses and all sorts of things to give us a chance to do this sort of thing. And it's one of those I'm going to be using this morning for myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see what I'm talking about. So yeah, I'm great. I mean, physically, absolutely the old self, but the eyes are definitely a strain. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, then. So, as we've publicised, we are doing season 1973, 1974. And if you're tuning into this show for the first time, we listen to George. He gives us his own account of that season. And I'll be putting up photographs on the screen. Some of them will be programmes. Some of them will be photographs from the era. But as I always say, it's over to you, George.
Yes, and what I start with, because it was quite a momentous season for Newcastle United, 73-74. And if anybody wonders why we've got a plaque on the wall for Joe Harvey, and they go back and look at this season as one of them, they might think, well, why hasn't he got a statue like some of the others have? Because can you imagine no money for transfers at all? Beginning of the season, not a bean. Any money he spent, he had to get by selling players, because all the money at that time was going into the redevelopment of St James's Park, and there absolutely not a bean come his way. What was 73-74 like? Well, just to give a flavour, like I have in the past, is that if you wanted to look at the music of the time, top of the pops was the Rolling Stones with Angie. Tie Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree. Crocodile Rock, of course, was the Elton John standard, and Killing Him Softly with his song Roberta Flack, of course, which was a famous tune. And if you're a picture goer, a cinema goer, the things that mattered then were the Exorcist, The Sting, American Graffiti, and Papillon, the story based on the prisoner on Devil's Island in France, and quite a notable story it was as well. So that's where we are in terms of what was happening in the world. In terms of Newcastle United, of course, we started the season, as I say, no money to buy players. So Joe Harvey had to manoeuvre one or two people out. My old friend Billy Coulson, for example, went to Southampton. Gordon Heinsohn went to Mansfield, and that's the squad that we had. And some of the others were sad though, because the money that did come into the club because Tony Green eventually decided, with the consultation with the club, that it was time to give up. They tried hard to get his knee working again and didn't. And then lo and behold, didn't Ollie Burton get a knee injury as well, and he had to retire. And so that insurance money went to the club, and to the players, of course, but none of it went to Joe Harvey. It all went into the rebuilding the ground. So even that wasn't a consolation. He did bring two players in though, and that was Doug Lawton from Morton, who we'd seen in the previous Texaco Cup series and enjoyed, and thought he may be a good backup. And a lad from Preston called Alex Bruce, who was scoring goals for Toffee with Preston, and they both came in. But on swaps, Alec Reid went to Morton for Lawton, and a couple of young uns went to Preston for Alex Bruce. And so that's how the season started. And as usual, of course, with Newcastle United, we started with 3 friendlies. We had a friendly at Middlesbrough, which we won 3-1 with a crowd of 12,500. Then we had a friendly with Carlisle United at home, which we for the Middlesbrough one we won 2-1. The Carlisle one we won, we drew 2-2, and only 8,000 turned up to the Carlisle one, which tells us something about what people thought about some of these friendlies. And then we went to Blackpool for a friendly, and we beat Blackpool 1-0 with a Terry Hibbert goal, with 8,000 coming out at Blackpool. And my memory of that was that most of those were Magpies anyway. There wasn't many Blackpool supporters in that crowd. But when you think about it, the friendlies were prolific in those days, as you and I have talked about before. But that was the only money that was coming into the club. There weren't big sponsorships like we get now. It was the gate money that paid the wages and got things going. So it's not surprising. So anyway, the season kicked off, and it kicked off at West Ham United. I think we should have a front of a programme for West Ham, Steve. Yes, that's right. And what an interesting starter, because West Ham were being touted as being the possible league champions because they were playing great football. And of course, when you looked at that team, with the likes of Tommy Taylor in the back, it's Bobby Moore, Frank Lampard Senior, of course, Billy Bonds, who of course people might not remember, is the sister-in-law of Redknapp. That's the family connection there. And Trevor Brooken, who was a great international player, Ted McDougall, a good centre forward, and then in the forward line pops up the name of Pop Robson, who'd had a very dramatic transfer to West Ham not long before, and on the left wing, a West Indian lad called Clyde Best, and it really was a good footballing team, a dangerous team, and that crowd was 28,500, and we went with some hope that we might get something out of the game. Our team was fairly predictable from the previous season. McFall, Craig Clark, Tommy Gibb, Bob Monker, Irvin Natras, Stuart Barraclough, Jinky Jim Smith, Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. And that lineup went nearly right through the season. And it was a great game, a good game, but a one which surprisingly we won 2-1. And it was thanks to Malcolm MacDonald, both goals scored by Supermac. He carried the team on that day, and he scored. We were 1-0 down at half time to Robson goal rather. You can imagine, the one with the Jody and the other team, and he's going to score against Newcastle. Of course he will. We went in 1-0 down, but after the second half, Malcolm gave the famous Bobby Moore and his Tommy Taylor at the back, the England centre half, give them quite a torrid time and scored 2 beautiful goals to get a 2-1 win. So that was a good kick-off for the season. We then moved to back home to a game against Southampton. I think that the programme for Southampton will be there. And the unusual covers on these programmes, but they were different anyway. And everybody was geared up to there being quite a good win against Southampton, having beaten West Ham away, and it was just under 30,000 went to the game. And lo and behold, what did we do? We lost 1-0 to a goal to Mick Shannon, who scored just on the half hour. but my memory of it is that we could have played all day and we would never have scored. It was one of those games, I'm afraid, which was disappointing, as I say, having started so well at West Ham. We then had another home match against Arsenal, and we weren't sure what to expect this time. Again, Arsenal, one of the top teams, and knocking doors out of windows, and it was I think it's fair to say nobody was expecting to do anything great against Arsenal, having made such a rick of the Southampton game, and so we played the Arsenal, and there's my age coming out when I say things like the Arsenal, because that's how people used to talk in those days. However, the crowd, the supporters still felt it was worth going and turned up in the numbers. There was nearly 40,000 came to the game, and we thought, well, let's see what happens here. And we actually got a good draw out of it, with Charlie George giving them a six minute lead, and almost immediately Malcolm McDonald equalised, and that's how it stayed for the rest of the game. It was a 1-1, and a game where looking at the teams, there was some really. Our team was as I said earlier, almost unchanged. The only change was that Terry Mack came in for Irvin Natras, and Irvin Natras went to right back because David Craig had an injury. But other than that, it was McFall, Natras, Clark, McDermott, Pat Howard, Bobby Moncur, Stuart Barraclough, Jinky Jimmy Smith. And Tommy Cassidy came in because Malcolm McDonald had a knock, and Keith Robson, another Robson, came in, and Terry Hibbert. But the Arsenal team included Bob Wilson, famous names, Pat Rice, Peter Story, Bob McNabb, Geordie Armstrong from Hebburn, Alan Ball, of course, who they got from Everton, the England player, and Ray Kennedy, a Geordie from Seaton Delville, was in that team, and Charlie George was on the left side of their attack. Very tricky, very clever player, and who gave most defences a tough time. And as I say, a 1-1 draw was quite creditable, considering how poorly we played in the previous game against Southampton. So we then move on to an away game at Ipswich, and I think there should be an Ipswich programme there. We that's it, yeah, and we end up with 21,500 at the game, and well, having done so well in the previous West Ham, everybody thought, well, how it will go at Ipswich. Ipswich weren't exactly the best team in the league, and lo and behold, we got a nice win. We got a 3-1 win at Ipswich, which was really surprising. Some people. Malcolm McDonald got 2 goals, and there was an own goal from one of the Ipswich defenders. It was a good win, and a one which, as I say, 21,500 at the game. Ipswich team had 1 or 2 stars in it. Mick Mills, who was the England left full-back, was in that team. They had a couple of Dutch players who were stars at the time. Kevin Beattie, who was an international defender and midfielder. Brian Hamilton, who became famous with Northern Ireland as on the right side of attack, and a young centre forward they introduced called Trevor Wymark, who was to become quite a well-known player, an international player. And on the left side, they had a young man called David Johnson. Now, he was a good player, but he wasn't outstanding. But the reason it's worth talking about David Johnson is that his son is now tearing the ground up at Nottingham Forest. That's the David Johnson that plays for Nottingham Forest. And sometimes show his father sitting in the stand, which must be quite nice for them. Our team was unchanged: McFall, Natras, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Bob Moncur. Pat Howard was now starting to establish himself as the centre of our defence. Stuart Barraclough, Jimmy Smith, Tommy Cassidy was still in, and Keith Robson was in the team because of injuries. But a good win for at Ipswich, and for some it was a surprising win because we hadn't actually been knocking doors out of windows at the time. And then we moved to another away game at Sheffield United, and we weren't sure what to expect of Sheffield. We always had good games at Sheffield, tough games as it happens, and we went to Sheffield with hopes because of what happened at Ipswich, etc. And we went and there was a good crowd, 27,000, which was a good crowd for Sheffield, and we surprised ourselves, I think, and came back with a creditable draw, having gone down very early in the game in 25 minutes rather, and an equaliser from Keith Robson. But we had to wait right to the 85th minute to get that equaliser. But everybody was pleased, at least, that we got a draw out of the game. The team was virtually unchanged: McFall, Natras, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Moncur, Tommy Cassidy out on the right now because Malcolm MacDonald was fit, Jimmy Smith, and Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. And in the Sheffield team, always had some notable players. They used to have a couple of brothers, Len Badger and his brother, but the brother wasn't playing, he was playing. And they introduced a young forward called Tony Curry, who blonde-haired lad who was to make his name with England, and a centre forward called Alan Woodward, who also was to become an England star, and a young left winger called Jim Bourne, who was to become quite famous, but not with Sheffield United. He moved on to better things in Scotland. So we're now establishing ourselves quite nicely, about mid-table, and everybody's thinking that this is great. Things are looking up. Things are looking good, and we're now headed back home to a home game with Ipswich Town. Having not long played them away and beaten them away, everybody thought, well, if we beat them away, we've got to beat them at home, surely. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. We beat them 3-1, and people were believing again. 36,000 in the crowd, and we had to thank Malcolm MacDonald again. 2 goals in the 26th and 28th minute. and then an own goal by Ipswich defender, it would have been a MacDonald hat-trick, actually, had the defender not deflected the ball in. However, MacDonald got the 2, and their goal was scored by David Johnson. And my memory of it is that it was an entertaining game. Ipswich always seemed to play decent football. And of course, their manager was somebody who we get to know quite well because his name was Bobby Robson. As I say, they played very good football, and to the point that this team was to develop into a championship winning team, and it was almost the same team as we played down at Portman Road at Middlesbrough, at Ipswich rather, and a good win anyway, and everybody went home quite happy. Having dispensed with Ipswich, the next game was another home game against Wolverhampton Wanderers, and again the anticipation that we may do something was in the crowd was there, and the crowd now suddenly shoots up to 40,000. So clearly the Gallagher Corner's expecting something, and they're not disappointed because we beat Wolves 2-0 in what was an excellent game from our point of view, with not 2 defenders scoring our goals actually, and at the last gasp, 85 and 93 minutes, Pat Howard got one and Irvin Natras got the other, but it was an excellent game. It really end-to-end stuff with Wolves playing very well indeed. So now we move on and we find out what this season did for us, because we're not just in the playing First Division, we're playing FA Cup, League Cup, and Texaco Cup. So we're in all the cups, and the first cup match is a Texaco Cup match from with Morton from Scotland, and we negotiate that with I think I've got the that's the Wolves game, and we everybody thinks because Morton's a lower division Scottish team that we're actually going to turn them over something very easily, and the fact of the matter is we won, but we only won 2-1, and it was again down to our attacking force of Tudor and Hibbert, 2 goals in the early first half, and then just after half time, Morton scored from a corner, and it was the lad Lawton who Harvey eventually bought. It was the centre half, and of course the crowd was not what we'd expect at St James's. There was just over 6,000 there, but for Morton that was probably a lot. So that was us starting off in the Texaco Cup. Our team, well, Harvey has always stuck by the team he liked. McFall, Natras, Clark, Tommy Gibb, Pat Howard, Bob Monkhurst, Judd Barraclough, Jimmy Smith, John Tudor, Malcolm MacDonald, and Terry McDermott playing on the left side. It wasn't the most entertaining of games, but we came away with the all important victory, which is what keeps everybody happy, of course. The next game is a home game with the Coventry, and I think there should be a programme for this one. Coventry City, we anticipated weren't playing very well, and everybody was anticipating quite a good victory.
Is this an away game, George? Because you sent me an away program for this, not a home.
Sorry, forgive me. Yes, it's an away game. It's not a home game. Forgive me. Okay. Yes, it is an away game. Although it's an away game, everybody was anticipating we'd get a result at Coventry because they weren't playing very well at all, and we got a 2-2 draw. But it was interesting. It was 2 goals from our prolific goal scorers, MacDonald and Tudor, that got with a draw, because we went 1-0 up with an early goal from Malcolm MacDonald, and then Coventry, just before half time, scored an equaliser, and then just after half time went in the lead, and we had to fight hard till about the 80th minute for John Tudor to get the equalising goal. So we came back with a 2-2, which I suppose people were relatively happy, but had hoped that we might do better than that. 25,000 at the game, which for Coventry was quite a big crowd. And we then come home to a match against Queen's Park Rangers. And I think there should be yep, there it is. And nobody's sure what to make of QPR, that not having a very good season. And we feeling was that we should win this one. And we were certainly, you could see by the crowd had anticipation, 45,000 at this game, which was great considering. And yet QPR just had a go at it basically, and they turned us over 3-2, which was extremely disappointing to everybody. I remember that Gallagher Corner moaning as the goals went in. We were 2-0 down at half time, goal in 3 minutes, goal in 5 minutes, and we were 2-0 down at half time. And then just after half time, they scored a third, so it looked like we're going to get a real hammering. But then John Tudor sprung to life and scored 2 goals in the 68th and 87th minute to give her a 3-2 scoreline to make it a bit more respectable. But to say it was disappointing was putting it mildly. Team as I'd expect was what we've been playing all season that far. Hardly any changes. Typical Harvey attitude to team. You know, it was McFall, Natris, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Moncur, Tommy Cassidy on the right because of an injury to Barraclough, Jink and Jimmy Smith, Martin MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. Now, the QPR team was making a name for itself, but had 1 or 2 people who did become notable, like Phil Parks, Terry Mancini, a fullback who became quite well known, and Frank McClintock, who eventually moved to Arsenal for a big fee and became quite famous as a manager as much as a player. And Jerry Francis is a name that people will remember from not just as a player, an England player, England captain, and a manager as well. And then Stan Bowles is a name that people like me will remember, because he was just a fantastic footballer. Almost another George Best from the south of England. You know, the long hair and the snaky dribbles and clever stuff. But unfortunately, he was blessed with a different type of addiction to George Best. His addiction was gambling, and he got into all sorts of bother in the betting shops around London, and didn't do him any good at all. And then, last but not least, of course, the infamous Terry Venables was in that QPR team. So they had players who were making a name for themselves and eventually made big names for themselves, and that was made them quite dangerous. And of course, we've seen just how dangerous they were when they managed to beat us at St James's Park. We then come home to the return match in Texaco Cup with Morton, and it's a game anticipated that we'll walk. I mean, because Morton's not one of the better Scottish teams. They're quite a poor Scottish team, and we managed to scrape a 1-1 draw against Morton, much to the disappointment of quite a big crowd for a Texaco Cup match, 23,000. I mean, they've been lucky to get 10,000 for these matches, but people obviously thought that something was going to happen. And it was a 1-1. It was not the best game it ever been to, because it just was dead. It was flat and had draw written all over it. But it was just particularly disappointing because everybody anticipated that Morton would get a hiding. Well, they didn't. They got a goal and hung on like grim death. They had one or two players who in Scottish football were on their way down, as it were, had played for the big clubs, like Alan Johnson, who played for the Dundees and played at international level, and Hugh McEnroy, who'd made a name for himself in the Football League with Nottingham Forest and across at Carlisle for a while, and he ended up at Morton as well. So there were one or two names that people recognised, but not a team that should have troubled us. But they did certainly trouble us and pushed us as hard as they possibly could. So we dispensed with Morton, and we then are off to an away game at Liverpool. And I think there could be a couple of pictures for this. The expectation always going to Liverpool was going to be hard, it would be a tough game, and certainly it was at Anfield. And they got two very early goals. Got one early goal. Peter Cormack, the right winger, put them ahead, and just after half time, Irvin Natras got an equaliser. But then, lo and behold, typical at Liverpool, a last-minute penalty from Lindsay, the midfielder, and there he is celebrating. Given the win, it was on 86 minutes. 46,000 at Anfield for that game. And the other thing I like about that picture is it's through the net, and you can see what Anfield was like compared to the Anfield we see on the television now, which is quite different. But we lost 2-1, and we really. People weren't that disappointed, is what I'm trying to say. That the lads went and gave it a go, and it was really, really, really good to get a decent result in a decent game, and to stretch them right to the last minute, of course, which is something we have a habit of doing at Liverpool anyway. Was also went down very well. Next, we now enter the League Cup, and we played Doncaster Rovers. At home. I don't think there's a program for that, Steve. Because it was a I don't know why, but it was one I couldn't find. And we everybody went with the expectation that this would be straightforward, and and it was straightforward. We had our usual team out, and people were anticipating a result. League Cup wasn't our favourite tournament, of course. 16,000 turned up, which gives you an indication of what people thought about the League Cup, even in those days. Well, they were treated to a goal fest. A hat-trick from Malcolm MacDonald, 2 from Keith Robson, and even a 1 from Frank Clark got a goal. So we ended up with 6-0 winners in what was entertaining for the crowd, but pretty miserable for Doncaster Rovers. Our team, well, it was the usual: McFall, Natras, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Munker, Cassidy, Jim Smith. Cassidy because Barraclough was still injured. Jinky, Jim Smith, Malcolm MacDonald, Keith Robson, and Terry Hibbett. Doncaster had 1 or 2 names in their team of people who were kind of on their way out of football, but playing in the lower reaches. And Archie Irvine, who'd made a big name with one of the Sheffields. Stanley Brooks, who had been a big name with Sheffield United. Steve Wignall, who was a big name with Nottingham Forest, was big centre forward. And so they had 1 or 2 players that were likely to cause us a bit of bother, but there was no bother on the occasion. We sailed through to the next round of the League Cup without any difficulty. It then moved on to back to league duty again, and we had a game at home against Manchester City. And I don't think there's a programme for that either, Steve. It wasn't the one I could find. Anyway, everybody was anticipating this would be a good game. Always was against Manchester City. And the size of the crowd tells you 37,000 suddenly from the low crowd at the League Cup match. And we beat Manchester City 1-0 with a goal from none other than Malcolm MacDonald. It was a good game, as games against Manchester City usually are. Our team was unchanged, McFall, etc. David Craig was back, Frank Clark, McDermott, Howard, Monker, Cassidy Smith, MacDonald, and because of injury, Irvin Natras slotted in on the left side with Terry Hibbett. And Manchester City's team, well, they had quite a star team. Ron Healy was the goalkeeper, very well-known goalkeeper. Glyn Pardo and Tommy Booth were at fullback, and Willie Connicky, a strong Scottish centre half. Tommy Towers was replaced by a substitute called Rodney Marsh, as a name who was to become very famous. Mike Doyle. Now, there's an interesting thing. Is I've mentioned Glyn Pardo already, and Mike Doyle. Anybody that watched the Sheffield United Blackburn Rovers game would see that the lad that scored the winning goal was called Doyle, and he was on loan from Manchester City. Well, Glyn Pardo and the Doyle here, Mike Doyle, are his grandfathers. That's both that lad's grandfathers playing for City. And that Colin Bell, who was a fantastic player, Francis Lee, who was regarded as a great English international, and a very scheming and tricky winger called Mike Summerby, who caused all sorts of bother. Was not afraid to mix it, Mike Summerby. He had a reputation for having a go, and he did have a go. He wasn't frightened to put his foot in for a forward. It was unusual. And then last but not least, of course, the famous and infamous Dennis Law, was in that team. So to get to beat that side was good, but not easy. And everybody went home very happy with that result.
And thanks to David John Cook for digging out that programme.
Oh, right. Yes, indeed. Yes. Oh, yeah. That's great. Yeah. Actually, he sent one or two others. I've got to say, David, I am grateful that you chipped in with this, because it's nice to have another input of some sort. The next match is a home game against Chelsea, which again, I don't have a program for. I don't know. When I was researching this one, there was quite a few home programs missing on the internet, and I don't know why that is. But
they're all very much the same. But there is David's program,
yes.
his official program from his kitchen table.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, David. That's just the job. Sort of help that's very valuable when you're doing something like this. And we're playing Chelsea, and Chelsea are playing very well, and we hoping that we still should get something out of this game. They're not top of the league, but they're playing very well. 32,500 at the game, which tells you what the crowd thought of the game, and we get a 2-0 win. And scorer, of course, none other than Malcolm MacDonald. But he made us wait. Penalty on 65 minutes, and then the second goal right on the 90th minute. In what I remember was a good game, because Chelsea played their part in that. Unusual. I'm going to. The referee for this game was a guy called Keith Stiles. Now, anybody who was around in about this time will remember that name, because he was a character. One of these referees that made the game more about him than about the match. You knew he was there. You know, some referees that don't even know they're there, which is what I prefer. But other referees like this one and McDermott and others that we've had in modern times, they seem to make the game more about them than they do about the teams. Anyway, we played Chelsea, unchanged team, McFall, Craig, etc. No changes, the usual forward line of Malcolm MacDonald and so on. And Chelsea had a team of characters, as I would describe it. John Phillips was a reserve goalkeeper at the time. Dave Sexton, ex-West Ham player, was their manager. Ron Harris had the nickname Chopper Harris. Now, that doesn't tell you something about him. It should, because he was desperate. Chopper Harris was his name, and Chopper by nature as well. Any winger that tried to get past Ron Harris was going to get kicked eventually. David Webb, the other fullback, and another man who got quite a character and became quite famous in football. Eddie McCready, a talented midfielder. John Hollins, of course, whose family we see on TV these days, not playing football, but talking about football. Steve Kember, a very talented midfielder that they got bought from Crystal Palace. Then they introduced into their team a young man called Alan Hudson, who ended up playing for England for a while. Very clever player, but sadly for him, injury prone. Tommy Baldwin, a Geordie from Hebburn, playing for them, and on the leading the line was one of their former juniors that won the Youth Cup, of course. At centre forward was Peter Osgood, another England centre forward. So that's not a bad Chelsea team to get a 2-0 win against, and everybody was quite happy about that.
And I was with Alan. I was actually with Alan this week.
Were you really?
I was filming in London, and I walked into this bar called the Clarence where we were filming, and
Yes.
Alan Hudson was there. So we had a little natter about Malcolm MacDonald, and showed him a photo of Malcolm now. But yeah, hell of a character, isn't he? See, you know, he had a really, you know, really good career, didn't he? And
really talented player, Steve, no doubt about it. And but I think his injury curtailed him just a little bit.
yeah, bit like Supermac as well, I guess.
Very,
you know,
very much so. Very much so.
I'm just trying to dig the photo out now, actually, and I'll just show you, just to show you what he looks like now, George. And there he is.
Oh, amazing! Yes, yeah. Oh, I would recognise him anyway. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Right.
that hair used to be blonde when I was in this match that we're talking about. But a good game and by two good sides. Next, we're back to the cup games again. The Texaco Cup, and we're playing Birmingham City in the Texaco Cup, and it's one everybody's expecting to win. We're at least we're hoping to win, but hope with Newcastle's not always a good thing, because we scraped a 1-1 draw, and it was we were behind from about the 30th minute, and it was only a penalty by Malcolm MacDonald in the second half that got with a 1-1 draw. But the impact of the cup on fans, well, 12,000 at the game, where previous game had been 30-odd thousand. So that tells us something about we got a 1-1 draw against Birmingham, but they had some characters in the team as well. Our team was virtually unchanged. McFall. It was an away game as well. McFall, Craig, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Monker, etc., with Malcolm MacDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert, etc. Gary Pendry was their centre back, big centre back, and Jim Gallagher alongside him were two big characters in that team. And then alongside them, on the left side of the defence, a lad called Kenny Burns, a Scotch lad who played for Manchester City and other teams, and ended up at Birmingham. Hard, tough little character, typical Billy Bremner style, but another one who wasn't getting his own way, kicked the grass and anything else that moved if he could get away with it. And they had on the right side of their attack a young lad called Trevor Francis, who was to become more than famous in his latter career, the first £1 million player, in fact. Bob Latchford, who was still an old England centre forward who was doing well with them. And then the left wing was a lad called Gordon Taylor, who we got to know when he came to Newcastle for a little while. Thunderbolt shot, Gordon Taylor. I remember being at the game. I forget what match it was, and he hit a ball from about 35 yards, and it hit the post. And I swear the goal was rocking for about another 10 minutes after that shot hit the post. Disappointing result from our point of view. An away game though, and at St Andrews, but nonetheless, it was a result that still disappointed, because I think most people were hoping we would win that one. And then the next one, I think there is a programme for this one, is an away game, at Spurs. That's it. That's them. And well, always we have good memories of matches at White Hart Lane. Good football matches, big crowds, 35,000 for this one. And people thinking, well, at least if we get a draw, it would be great. Well, we got more than a draw. We beat Spurs 2-0 in what was a fantastic game. And as I say, with a 35,000 crowd, but what was an excellent football match. We beat a Tottenham side which was highly regarded. I mean, Cyril Knowles, the ex-Middlesbrough full-back, was at left-back. Mike England, the Welsh captain, at centre-half. Steve Perryman, who was to become very famous. Ralph Coates, who was playing for England at the time, ex-Geordie that played for Burnley, then went to Tottenham. Martin Peters, who they'd bought from West Ham, the World Cup player. And on the left side of their attack, they had a Scotch lad called Alan Gilzine, who was a very dangerous player. Our team, the manager at the time, of course, was Bill Nicholson, who managed one of the double winning teams, and was given the credit for the style of football which is called push and run. It was just a simple application of a wall pass, as they would call it these days. But Bill Nicholson used it to great effect and produced a fantastic football team, a very good winning football team. So for us to win there was quite something. Our team was unchanged. McFall, Craig Clark, McDermott, Howard, Moncur, Tommy Gibb on the right, Jinky Jimmy Smith, Mark McDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbett. So that win at Tottenham was a good win and a one which in some quarters was not anticipated. Then, typical of what happens in cup games, we've just played Birmingham City in the Texaco Cup, and the next game is an away game at Birmingham in the League Cup. So these players would get sick of each other very, 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 very quickly. So off we go to Birmingham for a League Cup, which everybody's expecting a good result. We're both middle in the league. They're not, and we're anticipating that things would develop. So we go to Birmingham and we end up with a 2-2 draw. 1-1 at half time, and interestingly, it's our midfield that scores the goals. Interestingly, in the Texaco Cup, the Birmingham only got 12,000. For this, the League Cup, it's 25,000 come to see Newcastle United in the League Cup. Just the fans expressing what the different view of different trophies is, I think. We get a 2-2 draw, and thanks to goals from our midfield, from Tommy Gibb just before half time and Terry McDermott just after half time. And in between, early on, Bob Latchford scored an early goal, give them a lead, and then just on the hour he scores the equaliser. So we come back to a 2-2 draw, and it wasn't what people anticipated, what they hoped for. As always, being Magpies, we always want the best for our team. Interesting one for Birmingham City team, though, is they had a change in goal, and they had just bought the ex-Leeds United goalkeeper called Gary Sprake. Fantastic goalkeeper, well thought of. And there was something else. They had Gordon Taylor by now had been injured, and a young lad called Stephen Phillips came into that team. Had a fantastic game, but disappeared from football shortly after that. And really, I can't find anything in his career history but just after Birmingham it stopped. So whether it was injury or what, I don't know. But he just seemed to disappear after that game, after looking so promising in a team that included people like Trevor Francis. So anyway, we come home from a 2-2 draw at Birmingham, and we come home to a home league match with Stoke City, and I haven't got a program for that one, Steve. I don't know if David sent one, but we again have a history with Stoke, with various games that we've played that have been of particular interest. And we win 2-1 with 30,000 at the game. And that's the programme. Thanks again to David. That's fantastic. And we went in at 1-0 at half time, and Stoke equalised just after half time. But then Tommy Gable in the 70th minute, give us the win, which was excellent, and what we hoped for. Stoke's team, our team was basically unchanged. McFall, Craig Clark, McDermott, Howard, Bunker, Tommy Gibb outright because Barraclough's still struggling, Jimmy Smith, Tommy Cassidy, Martin McDonald, and Terry Hibbett. Stoke City team had some characters in it, but some names that we'll remember, and that is at the centre of the defence, they had a lad called Dennis Smith, great centre half, England player eventually, but then came to be centre half at our near neighbours down the road, and eventually became their manager for a short while as well. John Mahoney in our forward line, who we got from Everton, always caused a great deal of problems to us. And John Ritchie, dangerous forward. And they had up front a very dangerous pair in two old centre forwards they'd bought, Jimmy Greenhoff, who they'd bought from Leeds, and Jeff Hurst, who they'd bought from West Ham United, who is now, of course, Sir Jeff Hurst. So it was a good win against a Stoke team that came to give us the game. And my memory is it was quite an interesting game. And the two old centre forwards, Hurst and Greenhoff, gave our centre backs quite a tough game, is my memory. And it's a game that was worth watching. And then we're off to the League Cup again at Birmingham City for what is the replay for the 2-2 draw that we had just the weeks before. Sorry, Birmingham are come to us for the replay. It was at St Andrews. Now the replay was at St James's Park, and with people now taking the thing a bit more seriously, with 19,000 at the game at St James's Park, and anticipation was that we'd get through this time, and and hope was we made progress in the League Cup for a change. Well, as I often say, hope's a dangerous thing when you're a Newcastle fan, because we got beat 1-0 at home by Birmingham City in extra time. I mean, we really stretched it out. And who did the evil act, but none other than a young man called Trevor Francis from a penalty spot. They let the young kid take the penalty on 99 minutes, and that was us well and truly out of the League Cup, which was hugely disappointing, but not entirely. If you're a Newcastle fan with a League Cup, not entirely a surprise. Played with full team. There's one thing about Joe Harvey is he played the full team if they were all available, and they all were. The only slight change was that John Tudor was injured and Stuart Barraclough came back into the team, and Birmingham's team was what we'd played before. Only changes were Gary Sprake was still in their goal, Kelly Burns, Trevor Francis, Bob Latchford, and then they had another forward called Bob Haddon, a big forward who was coming into the team, and he was a handful for our defenders, is my memory of the thing. So there we're out of the League Cup now, so we can concentrate on everything else if there is anything else to concentrate on. And the next game is a game at Leicester City. Yes, should be a programme for that, yeah. And Leicester were bumping around the bottom of the league, is my memory, and everybody was hoping that we might get something out of this game. Well, it didn't happen. It was we gave them a good game, but we lost 1-0, 22,000 in the crowd. We lost 1-0 to a Keith Weller goal. A forward they bought from Tottenham, and obviously paying his fee back straight away. Leicester had one or two interesting characters in their team, of course. Peter Shilton in goal, Steve Whitworth at fullback, Graham Cross, Alan Birchnall in the forward line, Mike Stringfellow was playing for them by then, Keith Weller, of course, and the mercurial centre forward that they had, him of the Mexico moustache, Frank Worthington, who was an absolute character, and was also known for rolling his shorts up so high that they must have been cutting them in two, because he always had a great wedge of around his middle where he rolled his shorts up so tight. But Frank Worthington was a character, and became quite a character when he was commenting on TV. He didn't last very long because I think he used to turn up with some happy medicine inside of him sometimes, and the BBC, etc., didn't particularly go down well with him. But he certainly was a character and quite a player. But we lost 1-0 to Leicester. We're still hanging about the middle of the league there or thereabouts, which isn't great concern. But then we're home to Manchester United. I think there should be a picture for that one. Yeah, there is. And well, everybody's anticipates these games very, very much, and you can see by the crowd now we're up to 45,000 for Manchester United coming, and they're pushing hard at the top of the league. We're bounced around the middle, and we set off with great gusto. Tommy Cassidy gets the first goal, but then lo and behold, Lou Macari and John Graham scored 2 goals just before half time. So Manchester United go in 2-1 up. Then after half time, Tommy Cassidy on 64 minutes gets the equaliser, and we get the winning goal with John Tudor on 76 minutes. Now, my memory of that is that they ended up bombarding us for the last 20 minutes or so. It was all backs to the wall scenario, and but we with bearing in mind who we're playing, this is the Manchester United team. Our team was the usual: McFall, Craig, etc., and they had Martin Buchan in the defence, great Scottish defender, Alex Stepney in goal, England goalkeeper, Jim Holton, Steve Barnes, Brian Greenhoff, Willie Morgan, George Best, George Graham, Brian Kidd, of course, and Lou Macari. All names that went on to make themselves famous in football. in management and other things. But a 3-2 win for us was great. I mean, there's no doubt about that. That was a fantastic win. We're then off to Everton, and everybody's hoping that we may get something out of this. Haven't got something out of Manchester United, and the crowd at Everton is 35,000, and we go one up through Tommy Gibb, and everybody's anticipating just on half time. They get a corner and a big defender, Lyons, heads the equaliser, and that's the way it stayed till the end at Everton. But it kept us in our mid-table position, which was to say acceptable at the time was not bad, bearing in mind what limited recruitment we'd had, and we came to home to and the Everton side was Mick Lyons, as I've just said, John Hurst, a good defender, Mike Bernard, a good midfielder, Mick Buckley, who was a great midfielder, clever player, Joe Royal, of course, who's still involved with the club, and Brian Connolly, who John Connolly, rather, who was an ex-Burnley player that they took on. So it wasn't a bad Everton team to come away with a draw from. We're now heading home to the Texaco Cup, and of course, lo and behold, who were playing it in the Texaco Cup? But Birmingham City. These players must have been sick of the sight of each other in this season. I mean, I don't know how many times we're going to be playing them. Unbelievable. And the teams are virtually the same. Very little change. Birmingham introduced a new goalkeeper called David Latchford, who went on to make a name for himself. John Calderwood came into the side, and Steve Phillips, the lad I mentioned before, who was on as a substitute. The manager was an interesting character, Fred Goodwin, who was regarded as a brilliant coach. Our team virtually unchanged: McFall, Natris, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Moncur, Barraclough, Jenkins, Jimmy Smith, Paul Cannell played because Malcolm MacDonald was injured, John Tudor and Terry Hibbett. And the crowd was not brilliant. 6,000 6,000 for this match. And it ended up 1-1. And we some people felt that we were looking to get a 1-1, to be honest. Anyway, the next game was immediately afterward was a return leg to Birmingham City for the Texaco Cup, and we I know people were I got the distinct impression that if we'd gone out of this Texaco Cup, I don't think people would have been terribly upset. But the fact is that still 8,000 at St Andrews for the return game, and I suspect most of those were probably Geordies. And we went, and it was a dour game, really dire game, and we ended up with 1-1, and of course that meant we had to go into extra time, and we ended up getting the extra time goal by Tommy Cassidy. And so we progressed to the next stage of the Texaco Cup, which were now the knockout stages. It's believe it or not, we went home for our next league game against Birmingham City. I mean, when I did this, and I kept looking, thinking I'd made a mistake.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, the players must have known each other by better than first names because they'd seen so much of each other. Anyway, we came home, and I think there's a program for it there, Steve.
No, it's the one we don't have. No, we had the away one, but not the home game.
Not the home one, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was, as I say, when I first set this up, and I looked and I kept seeing Birmingham City coming out of the pot. It was just mad. Anyway, we got through the cup and went home for a league match, and lo and behold, the beat were 1-0 at St James's before 28,000. Now that's interesting. When we played them just a few days beforehand in the Texaco Cup, we couldn't get 8,000, but because it's a league match, we're up to 28,000. Also, I wonder how much of that is people not having the money to go to matches.
Yeah, possibly.
Twice a week. You know, that could have been part of it. Anyway, they beat us 1-0, which slightly dented us a bit because it dropped us below the middle of the league, which was a bit worrying. We then go to the next round of the Texaco Cup, which is Dundee United, and we anticipated a good game on this one, but again, 8,000 at the game was just an absolute. I mean, you know what St James's Park's like with that number in it. There must have been echoing round the ground. Anyway, we come away with a sadly a 2-0 defeat, and everybody thinks, well, we're out of this. Sorry, it was an away match, 2-0 defeat, and we think we're out of it. But lo and behold, we have to come back for the second leg, which is at St James's Park, and in between we have a home match against Derby County in the league, which we managed to lose 2-0, which was disappointing because it damages our league position. Our team against Derby was unchanged. Some interesting characters in there. The Derby team, of course, with Colin Todd, who they bought from our near neighbours, Roy McParland, who became a part of their championship team, John McGovern, Archie Gemmell, all names that people will remember. Alan Winton, Roger Davis, and Kevin Webster, all names that made their way in football. And they turned us over 2-0 at St James's Park, which was horrifying now because we're now slipping below the middle of the league. So we return match for this Texaco Cup game, and we're at home. And well, I think most people thought, well, we're out of it. What's the point, you know? And the crowd reflects it. 5,000 at this game, and lo and behold, they go and turn it on and beat them 4-1 after extra time, and so we progressed in a cup that everybody thought we were out, and the goals were predictable: McDonald, Cassidy, Tudor, and Barraclough. So it was, as I say, people thought they were out of the cup, and to go and get a 4-1 result, which puts us through to the next round, and we're now running towards the semi-finals, of course, well, it's starting to feel good again. The next game is an away game at QPR. Now, having had having beaten us at St James's, we weren't sure what we'd expect down there with 16,000 at the game, and we knew it would be a tough game. They weren't going to give it away, that's for sure. And they certainly ended up as a very entertaining match. It was 2-0 at half time to them, and then McDermott and Bob Moncur equalised for her, and then just before the final kick on 90 minutes, Stan Bowles scored a fantastic solo goal to give them a 3-2 win, and as it pushes us again down towards the wrong end of the league, which we where we don't want to be. So it's and people are now starting to question: well, are we losing these matches because we got involved in this Texaco Cup, when we shouldn't have done? But anyway, so the next game is we come home to a Leeds United game. Always going to be a tough game. 36,000 at this game, and again, Leeds always a tough nut to crack, and they beat us 1-0, which now has got the alarm bells ringing in the Gallagher corner about a position in the league, because to lose another one was quite worrying. And the Leeds team, of course, was very strong at that time. Our team was the same: McFall, Craig, Clark, McDermott, Howard, Moncur, Gibb, Jink and Jimmy Smith, Malcolm McDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. Leeds, David Harvey in goal, Paul Rainey, Trevor Cherry, Norman Hunter, Geordie, Gordon McQueen, a big blonde centre-half whose daughter does Sky Sports now, of course. Paul Madeley, Billy Bremner, Terry Yorith, Peter Orimer, Mick Jones, and Joe Jordan. And Joe Jordan, of course, they'd bought from Manchester United. They were a strong team, and even though we still hope we might get something, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. We got a 1-0 1-0 defeat, and the worst thing about that, of course, is that we're now slipping well below to the bottom half of the league. The next game is a home game against Sheffield United, and people are hoping that we could get something out of that, and sure enough, we did. We got a 1-0 win, and the crowd was 28,000, which, considering the previous defeats, wasn't too bad. We got 1-0, and it was John Tudor who scored the goal that mattered. And again, our team was unchanged, and the Sheffield United team was identical to the one that we played at Bramall Lane. The next game was an away game at Arsenal. I think there might be a program for that, Steve. Yeah, and again another tough game. Nobody anticipated getting anything. 39,000 at Highbury for this one, and lo and behold, in the 10th minute, Terry Hibbert puts 1-0 in front, and for the rest of the game, we defend and come home with a 1-0 win, which is a great victory for us by any stretch of the imagination. And we've got, our team virtually unchanged. McFall, Craig, Alan Kennedy now slipped into the team because of an injury to Frank Clark. And the Arsenal team with all its characters in, Bob Wilson, Pat Rice, Geordie Armstrong, Alan Ball, Ray Kennedy, and John Radford was a new centre forward for them. Who was, but anyway, we to get an away win at Arsenal any time was a great thing. So we're now starting our trek into the FA Cup, and we come to the third round of the FA Cup, and we're at home to Hendon, Southern League team who cock a hoop had come into St James's because they knew it would be a big payday for them, and sure enough, even though it was a non-league side, the FA Cup's always attractive on Tyneside. 35,000 at the game, and Malcolm McDonald scores on 40 minutes, and everybody thinks, well, that's job done. Until about 70th minute, my lad called Hayder scored an equaliser, and they held out right to the end, and we had to go the next week for a replay on the Wednesday to Hendon, and of course there was lots of trepidation on Tyneside. we had this magic way of slipping out of the cup to non-league teams even then, and that was the great fear of the time. And so we went to Hendon, and lo and behold, for once they turned it on. 16,000 at the game. That's the biggest Hendon crowd it ever had in the ground at the time. And Malcolm McDonald, Terry Hibbert, Terry McDermott, John Tudor scored the goals, mostly in the second half. It was 1-0 at half time, but we're through to the next round with a great sigh of relief that we didn't get turfed out by a non-league team. We're then back to an away game at Wolves. Molyneux, and we'd hoped to continue the winning ways, but 26,000 at the game. We didn't. We lost 1-0 to a Richards goal. John Richards was a player that were developing, was not just developing for Wolves, but he was developing for England as well. A clever little forward. And people were keeping their eye on him because he was quite a tricky little character, and the Wolves team had others though: Phil Parks, Jeff Palmer, Mike Bailey, Francis Monroe, Alan Sunderland, who they'd got from Arsenal, John Richards, as I said, Kenny Hibbert, who of course is the brother of our Terry Hibbert, and David Wagstaff, who was a player that bought from Manchester City, a very tricky forward. Our team was as predictable, very predictable. McFall, Craig, Alan Kennedy still in, McDermott, Howard Clark, playing slightly forward because of other injuries. Moncur injured now. Tommy Gibb, Tommy Cassidy, Matt McDonald, John Tudor, and Terry Hibbert. But it was as I say, a game that John Richards was the undoubted star, and he took the game for them really. So we're now back home, and we're at home to West Ham United. And everybody's biting their fingernails now because we were needing to start winning because we're slipping down towards the bottom of the league by now. We'd had some terrible run of results, and West Ham aren't going to be the easiest team to play. So West Ham come to St James's, 28,000 at the game, and got off to a flying start. 15th minute, Malcolm McDonald scores, lovely goal, and then the game sort of goes end to end, but very defensively. And then in the 53rd minute, a lad called Pat Holland scores an equaliser. Now, if you look at the England bench, there's a Holland that's one of Southgate's training staff. That's the son of this Pat Holland from West Ham, because he played for West Ham as well eventually. And we get a 1-1 draw, which everybody had hoped would become a win, but it wasn't. And so it went, and West Ham fielded virtually the same team as they had when we went to Upton Park, with Pop Robson playing for them against us and causing us all sorts of problems, of course. Like most Magpies, when they come home, they let people know that they're home. We were relieved to get a 1-1 draw rather than a win. We're now back to the fourth round of the FA Cup, and we're thinking about Scunthorpe United at home, and we think, well, surely we're going to progress against Scunthorpe United, and because it's the FA Cup, 40,000 at the game, the fact that it's Scunthorpe doesn't matter, it's the FA Cup. And within 5 minutes, of course, our hopes are dashed when a young man called Keeley slots Scunthorpe into the lead. And then for quite a long time, we're struggling to get anywhere near Scunthorpe. But lo and behold, our saviour is Terry McDermott with a long free kick in the 63rd minute to get us a draw. And sighs of relief all round in the Gallagher corner. But going to Scunthorpe for a replay isn't regarded as easy money, because on the Wednesday, that's where we've got to go, and sure enough, we did. Scunthorpe team, interestingly, when I looked at it, it's one of the teams where I struggled to find anybody that I knew anything about, and it wasn't until I looked at it really for a long time, I did see a name that means a lot to all of us. A young man called Neil Warnock was playing centre forward for them. I mean, that's a name that everybody must know in football. So it was as I say, I looked for ages, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to find anything to say about this lot. But Neil Warnock, of all people, I thought, well, goodness gracious. So we go to on the Wednesday for the replay, the Scunthorpe, and 21,000 at the game. Again, at that time, that was Scunthorpe's biggest ever crowd. And I reckon that's largely because there was that many Geordies went down with the replay. And the lads, far from letting me down, turned it on 1-0 at half time through Barraclough, and then 88 minutes, Malcolm McDonald finishes it off, and we go home with a 3-0 win. So we're through to the next round of the FA Cup. However, it's not lost on the Gallagher corner. I can remember that we're getting void in this club, and we're sliding down the league, so we need to start to get some points. It's as I say, it's not lost that we're sliding down. We're now away to Derby, a game which we 25,000 at the racecourse ground, and we lose that 1-0 to a Roy McFarlane goal from a free kick. We're then home to Southampton, and we're now at the stage of hoping and praying for a win because we're getting so far down the league, and it's we're away to Southampton. Sorry, not at home. There should be a programme there for Southampton, and we surprise everybody, or at least we thought we were going to surprise everybody by going into an early lead. But the reality struck home towards the end of the match when they managed to stick 3 goals in and sent me home with a 3-1 defeat, which was this is disappointing, putting it mildly. So we're now just above the bottom 2 in the league. So yes, the FA Cup run's great, but we need to do something to turn this around. So the next game's a home game against Coventry, and I think there's a programme for that. Yeah. Excuse me, Steve, I just want to blow my nose. Do you want to run your...
Big thanks to all our sponsors. Thanks to Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria, and you can find them at mrvickys.co.uk. Email info@mrvickys.co.uk and place an order by phoning 01768 210 102. Thanks to Fruy Vita Getaways. Book your holidays or short breaks in the UK or around the world with them. Let them find your happy place. Abta and Atol registered. You can contact them by emailing fruyvitagetaways@gmail.com. Call or text 0792 842 7895 and join their Facebook group at Fruy Vita Getaways. Thanks to Media Arts for all the technical help and videos that they do. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. If you want to join the channel, click join, and you can see the various rates that you can pay to help support us. If you want to join by subscribing, hit the subscribe button. That is free. Hit the thumb up under the video to help the algorithm, and click share to other social media platforms. If you do subscribe, we do give you a free car sticker. Just email John at nufcmatters.com and he will post you one out. If you want to join the cult, which is a one-off payment of £25, where you get a scarf, a pen, a cup, and entry into the monthly draw, then go to nufcmatters.com and look for the cult membership, or put your phone over this smart code and it will take you straight there. We are available as well as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. And we do support the food bank on this channel. So if you want to make a virtual donation from anywhere in the world, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and put your money into the match day bucket. We've got some events coming up. First off in April, April 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 11th. Peter Beardsley Soccer School is back for ages 6 to 16 years. Go to peterbeardsleysoccerschool.com for more information. An evening with John Anderson at the Time House Surf Cafe, Tuesday the 18th of April. Book your tickets direct from the venue. An evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson 2 nights later, Thursday the 20th of April at the Irish Centre. Tickets from nufcmatters.com. An evening with Nobby Solano at Laurels in Whitley Bay is May the 11th. So contact the venue direct if you want to go to that event. And we've got our NUFC Matters end of season party, which is the 27th of May at 7 o'clock. Tickets are a tenner from nufcmatters.com. An evening with Rob Lee at Louis Liquor Store, 1st of June, and tickets direct from the venue. And an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark and John Beresford, Friday the 2nd of June at the Grand Hotel Gosforth, which is in aid of the Healing Tour charity. And you can get your tickets direct from them at the healingtour.org.uk website. Just click events. A little bit later in the year, an evening with Gavin Peacock, July the 10th. Tickets from nufcmatters.com for that one. And if you like your boxing, a Night of Champions featuring Frank Bruno, Ricky Hatton, Nigel Benn and Joe Calzaghe. Tickets for that one from goldstarpromotions.com. Okay, George, back to you.
Right, okay. We're now back home to a home match against Coventry, and everybody's hoping and praying that we can get a result against them to push we back up to towards the middle of the league. And lo and behold, they didn't let us down this time. They beat Coventry 5-1. We not without its scares though. Coventry, it was 1-0 at half time. And it stayed that way right till the 70th minute when we scored 3 very quick goals. And then they came back with a consolation right at the death. But a goal from Alex Bruce, the lad they brought from Preston, John Tudor, Malcolm MacDonald, and 2 own goals by defenders who really Malcolm MacDonald frightened into scoring an own goal. There would have been his if it hadn't hit them. But big sigh of relief in the Gallagher corner, I can assure you, with that, because it did the goal. It did the goal difference no harm, and we were getting desperate for points as well. So that takes a bit of pressure off on the league, because the next round is the 5th round of the FA Cup, and we're drawn away to West Bromwich, which is never an easy travel. And now I remember this particular game because my lot persuaded. This is one of the games my lot persuaded Alfie Lowther to run the Hollands bus to West Brom for the cup match. And in those days, and not the sort of mess we had with cup tickets recently here, Alfie Hollands used to buy the tickets as a bus proprietor and sell. He had the job of selling them then. And of course, he filled the bus because he knew all our lot wanted to go. It was our lot that persuaded him to put the bus on. And that's slightly different way to doing it now. And I'm sure Armstrong Galley used to do that sort of thing as well in those days. But anyway, they went to West Brom. Bit of trepidation, but from where I was told when our lot came back, they played out of their skin. They played West Brom off the park and got a 3-0 win thanks to MacDonald, Barraclough and Tudor. And 44,000 at the Hawthorns. Always good crowds at West Brom for Newcastle United. West Brom team on the day was had right back Gordon Nisbet, who was a Geordie, Ray Wilson, the ex-England fullback, Asa Hartford, a very clever midfielder who played for England, Tony Brown, a desperately clever attacking player, and a left winger, Alan Glover, who became quite a well-known player in later years. And the manager, of course, was well known as Don Howe, the ex-England World Cup fullback. And we now got that on. We're back to St James's Park for a home match against Liverpool, a league match. Now, always trepidation with Liverpool, but everybody's hoping that we might at least get something, and not disappointed this time, because we get a draw. It's a 0-0 draw, but far from a boring draw, as my memory. It was end-to-end stuff, and where there's some draws where you could play all day and they would never score. The only difference in this one is that everybody was mystified how they didn't score 4 or 5 each. But it was a strong Liverpool team. You know, Ray Clements, Tommy Smith, Alec Lindsay, Phil Thompson, Peter Cormack, Emlyn Hughes, Kevin Keegan, OBE, Brian Hall, Alan Waddle, Phil Beaumazer and Ian Callaghan. A very, very strong team managed by Shankly, of course. Our team, well, it was the usual: McFall, Craig Clark, etc., with MacDonald and Tudor leading the line and Terry Hibbert on the left. So a 0-0 draw was the result, and as I say, an entertaining 0-0, which is not bad. we're in the league. At least we're hovering about the middle of the league again, which is a bit of a sigh of relief. Next, we're off to Leeds for an away match at Leeds United, and another tough game. Nearly 50,000 at the game, and we wait with trepidation to see what happens. But just after half time, Alan Clark, their deadly centre forward, scores, puts them in the lead, and everybody's heart sinks and wonders what's going to happen. But lo and behold, a clever ball from header down from McDonald at Stuart Barraclough, and Stuart made it 1-1 in 52 minutes, and that's how it stayed till the end. So a well-earned point, a hard-earned point at Leeds, which everybody was relieved about. And as I say, it kept us hovering about the middle of the league instead of sweating on being down towards the bottom of the league. So the next, we're now back to the FA Cup, and this is something of a notorious FA Cup match against Nottingham Forest, and 55,000 at the game. Yeah, that's them, and a fantastic game. Forest up 2-1 at half time, but after half time, of course, Newcastle equalised, and that prompted what they call the pitch invasion. And the first time I've seen on any football match, on this one, it says the match was annulled. In other words, they complained to the. I'm sure that people recognise people in these crowd shots, because a lot of them will still be around. Well, I think you were there, weren't you, Steve?
No, before my time, I was only 2 when this happened.
Right. Oh, right. Sorry. Well, there'll be faces there that people recognise. I think I joked once about recognising one or two faces that I'd seen in court over the years, but never mind. And we end up winning 4-3, but Nottingham Forest claim that they would have won the match if it hadn't been for this invasion. And the match, as I say, was annulled, something I've never seen in a football match before. And so they determined that the match has to be replayed, but not just replayed, but replayed at a neutral ground as punishment for the fans going on the pitch. Meantime, we have a home match, an away match at Chelsea, and we go to Chelsea and lose 1-0, sadly, which puts a lot of pressure back on our league position. It was a good game at Chelsea, but once Chelsea got in the lead, they never looked like losing it. And we never looked like getting back into the game. So, well, as I say, we're at desperation for our league position, very worrying for our league position. So then we go to an old match replay, which they decided was to be at Goodison Park, Everton's ground, and it was played, and unfortunately, before 41,000 people, it was a 0-0. So we had to play them again. That was on the Monday, and then on the Thursday we had to go back to Goodison Park again and play the match again. Again, 41,000 at the game, which nice bit of money for Everton. 2 games over 40,000 in a week, and we beat them 1-0, thanks to Malcolm McDonald. And that was the picture you showed, Steve. That was Supermax scoring the winning goal and got we out of this mess, which it was a nightmare for everybody. I think is the honest answer. To go twice to Goodison Park. But anyway, Supermac settled it forward, and we got through to the semi-final. Next match is a home match against Leicester, and again, we're desperate for points. Leicester are a good side. Thanks to David for that. That's one of his, I think. And with Peter Shilton, the big names that they had playing for them, Dennis Rolfe, Keith Weller, Mike Stringfellow, Frank Worthington, etc. Our team virtually unchanged. McFall, Craig, Alan Kennedy in because Clarkie's got an injury. McDermott, Bob Monkert, etc., and the usual forward line. Leicester come and give a good game, and we go in at half time at 1-0 up. 0-0 at half time. Then on 50 minutes we get a penalty, and Terry McDermott slots that in. And then, typical Newcastle, 88 minutes, Weller scores the equaliser. So the 33,000 people go home slightly deflated or very deflated at a 1-1 draw. But at least it was a draw, and got to a point to keep us stuck in the middle. Next game is an away game at Manchester City. There might be a programme for that, yes. And always good games at City. Big crowd, 33,000. But unfortunately, 2 goals in the first 20 minutes from Francis Lee, and the City are 2-0 up and never looked like losing it. Cassidy got a one just after half time for us to pull one back. But we ended up losing 2-1, which puts our league position in jeopardy in a sense, because we're just above the relegation zone now, and that's not to say not healthy, is putting it mildly. We're now at the semi-final of the FA Cup, having had all that stuff with Forest, and we're drawn against Burnley, of course. They're the other team in the semi-final, and everybody knows this is going to be a tough game, and Burnley are playing well. They're one of the teams that's been touted about as being possible league champions. 60,000 at Sheffield Wednesday's ground, Hillsborough, for this, and it's an even Steven. It's a very, very even match, 0-0 at half time, and then 65 minutes. The stuffing was knocked out of Burnley by none other than little Terry Hibbert. Terry Hibbert played one of the most sublime passes I've seen in a football match. He hit a ball 60 yards at least, and it just skimmed above the surface of the turf. It didn't touch the turf. It just skimmed above the surface, and it landed at Malcolm McDonald's feet in full throw, and the rest's history. Just slipped it past the Burnley goalkeeper, and that was it. And you could see the stuffing disappear out of Burnley's legs. And it wasn't long before he 10 minutes later, he added a second to make it certain that we were going to Wembley. But as I say, that pass by Terry Hibbert is one of the finest pieces of football I can remember. It was so accurate and long, and left us with, it killed Burnley off. There's no doubt about that. So now we can concentrate on the league again, and we go away to Stoke City, and unfortunately we lose 2-1 to Stoke, which rattles our cage a little bit in the league. We're then at home to Everton on the 6th of April, and desperate for points. 46,000 at the game. to help our league position. And lo and behold, they come up trumps. McDonald scores in the 51st minute, Latchford equalises 58th, and then John Tudor, McDonald gets the winner on the 70th minute from the penalty spot. So 2-1 win against Everton, and that's making our league position look a little bit more safe. The next game, believe it or not, is a home game, league game against Burnley, who we've just beaten in the Cup semi-final. 35,000 at the game, and everybody's hoping that we add to our points collection. Well, Burnley turn me over, don't it? Typical Newcastle. 17th minute, Jeff Nulty, who we got to know very well, puts them in the lead. Alan Dobson, another Geordie from playing for Burnley, puts them 2-0 in the lead. And then Malcolm McDonald, just on the stroke of half-time, pulls one back. But we couldn't get back into the game. Whatever we did, Burnley had us bottled in. So we lost it 2-1, which was a bit depressing. The next match is an away match at Manchester United. We not anticipating much out of this game. To go to Old Trafford at any time was never very easy. But we didn't get disappointed in the sense that Manchester United beat us 1-0 with a goal from Jim McCalliog, 45,000 at the game. And it was not a bad game. They tried, but we just couldn't get into the game. McCalliog was one of the Manchester stars. And we lost 1-0 to start sliding again. The next game was a home game against Norwich City. We always Norwich are not playing well, and they're actually in danger. So everybody's thinking, well, at least we should do something out of this game. Well, we were miserable. My memory of this 32,000 at the game was one of the most miserable games I've seen. It was a 0-0 draw, and they could have stayed for 2 days. Thanks for the programme, David. That's great. They could have stayed there for 2 days, the matches, and they would never have scored. So we at least we got a point to help our league position, and to some degree it helped Norwich as well. Now, because of the way the fixtures were shifted around because of our various cup runs, the very next week, in the very next Wednesday, we went to Norwich to play them away at Carrow Road. And so we went hoping they might get something, and they didn't disappoint with it. They actually got in the lead in the 53rd minute, and Norwich equalised in the 73rd before 18,000 fans. So we got another point to help our league position, Norwich City were as I say, near the bottom, and the point to them was very precious. They were then managed by John Bond, who had taken from West Ham as a player, and then eventually he became the manager. The other reason I'm looking at the Norwich team is a young man called Colin Suggett's in that team, who we got to know very well at St James's Park as well. but it was a 1-1, and the team stuck at it and helped lift the league position just a bit. The next game is a home game against Birmingham City. I mean, they must be sick of seeing each other, these two teams, and we end up with a 1-1 draw. Keith Robson scoring ours and Trevor Francis theirs. 35,000 at the game, and we heave a sigh of relief in the Gallagher corner to get a point, because we're desperately sliding towards the wrong end of the table. We then come to a game which surprised everybody, that here we are in a Texaco Cup final, and we're playing but Burnley, and we haven't just been beaten by them at home in the league. We know it's not going to be easy, and we for the Texaco Cup final did at least attract a 35,000 crowd, which was way up on the crowds that they'd been having for the Texaco Cup, and it was 1-1 at the end, so we had to have extra time, and we won 2-1 in extra time with one from Malcolm MacDonald and 2 from Bob Munker. Bob Munker seems to have this knack of scoring goals in cup finals, which is not a bad knack to have, I suppose. And we won the Texaco Cup. I think there might be a picture of the Texaco Cup there, Steve. Oh no, that's the Texaco Cup winning team. That's right. Which was great. And believe it or not, our next home game, is an away game to Burnley. I mean, yeah, again, to another team we must be sick of seeing that year, because we played them so many times, and again, desperate for points, and 25,000 at the game. Fletcher scores for Burnley, and within a minute, Malcolm MacDonald equalises the game for us and gets a very valuable point. And we're now looking safe. We're not desperate for a league. We're not going to be very high, but we're safe at least. Now the next game is a momentous one, because it's the FA Cup final against Liverpool, and there it is. Everybody has high hopes of this. The only people who don't think we're going to do well are the national press, as always. However, there are all sorts of strange noises coming out of St James's Park from the dressing room and other places about some of the unhappiness about the arrangements for the cup final, and for the players particularly, like what sort of bonus they're going to get, or they're going to get any bonus at all. And then there was rumours about the fact that the club wouldn't buy them their suits and this sort of thing, where Liverpool were kitted out in beautiful grey sports suits with a badge on their blazers and all that sort of thing. And then we came out at Wembley wearing these wonderful violet-coloured tracksuit tops, where Liverpool were in all red tracksuits, looking as smart as ever. Now, the story I've got, and this is all alleged, is that those tops were bought by Seymour for a girls' netball team, and he had them in the shop, but the order was cancelled. So when the cup final come, he sold them to the club to give to the players for the cup final. So that's how they've ended up wearing those peculiar coloured tracksuit tops at the FA Cup final, which I'd love to ask Malcolm McDonald what he thought about wearing that tracksuit top, because it disaster. The other rumour was, of course, that there they are splitting up for the kickoff. The other rumour was, of course, that our team had all had flu, that the team was ravaged with flu. And again, that's something I'd like to talk to McDonald about, because the club never played that card during the game or after the game. It was other people that started saying that the team had flu because we played so badly. I mean, we didn't play badly. We were bloody awful. It was nearly tears in my house. I can remember my father was close to tears at the final whistle. It was so bad. And I think there's probably a lot more pictures as the Steve. Yeah, that's at the end. Keegan Console and Frank Clark. And that's the famous suits. You know, they said that the club wouldn't buy them suits. Well, the 50-shilling tailor who were on Northumberland Street decided to donate suits to the team. They're black velvet evening suits, would you believe? And they all got kitted out. And now the other story I get from somebody I know in the 50-shilling tailor was that they had bought them and they couldn't get rid of them, so they decided to donate them to the Newcastle players. I mean, what a mess! And there's players standing in amongst the Marine band, trying to think about what had happened, because they just had a shellacking, as the honest answer. The other theory is about that morale is that Liverpool players were going to get most of the cup final winning fee to share amongst themselves, where all our players were going to get was an extra match fee, which was just a few quid, which was ridiculous. And there's the homecoming. That's the homecoming for a Newcastle team that lost, which I find incredible. There's St James's Park for a team that lost. I mean, I know Malcolm feels peculiar about celebrating a loss, but I've got to say it says a lot to me about what our fans really, really believe. And there's the magpie, Peter Anderson, who went everywhere with the club. Great man. And I forgot what that one is. All right, yes, yeah. It's more of the homecoming as well.
Yeah, David sent a couple of little bits.
Yes,
in,
that's great. That's great.
That was the cup final team, and it was signed on the back by all the team as well. So
yeah,
bit of history there from David, and that's from one of the programs. Just further welcome home photographs. Okay, George, back to you.
And we then, of course, come home to guess what? A friendly. We've just been beaten in a cup final, and we're playing a friendly against Middlesbrough at home, and with 30,000 for this friendly, and it's a 5-3 win to us. Hat-trick for Tudor, 2 for Cannell, and 1 for Bruce, and Middlesbrough, Hickson, Foggen, who they'd bought from us, of course, and Alan Smith, who was to be with us for a short while. We then moved to a last game, home game against Spurs, and didn't we go and lose it 2-0? And as if that wasn't enough, we then had another friendly. Oh, nice one, yeah. Well, that was the last game of the season, which we managed to lose. Thank God we didn't need the points to stay up, because otherwise we would have lost. We actually finished 15th, and then finished the season with a friendly against the Mackhams. For Cock of the North, I gather they called the 3 games. We beat them 3-2 with Terry McDermott scoring 2 and Bruce scoring the other, and Belfit and Hughes scoring for the Mackhams, with 39,000 for a friendly. I mean, just ridiculous. But a traumatic season, and as you can see by the length it's gone on, the Tony Green testimonial, yeah. I mean, what a player he would have been. if we managed to keep him. So it nearly 70 games we played. Malcolm MacDonald scored, that's the Texaco Cup win, scored 28 goals. John Tudor scored 21, which was the bulk of all the goals that we scored that season. And we finished 15th. But there are those that think that had we not got involved in the Texaco Cup and the League Cup and the FA Cup as much as we did, we might have done better in the league. But however, but what a season. And as I said at the beginning, for Joe Harvey to manage all of that without any resources at all to strengthen his team or do anything with his team is nothing short of a miracle for me. And the fact that people like Malcolm MacDonald and again John Tudor played almost 60 games in that season. I mean, how many of the top professionals would go through a season and play every game? I don't think there's many, to be honest. But
definitely not.
That's the way we were. So that's
amazing season. When you would
big
be along,
season.
When you would be a long one, but George, you made that effortless. Great to have it back. And thank you for taking us down memory lane. Thanks to David, as we've
I'm sorry
said,
if it was a bit long, but you can only tell the story that's in front of you.
Exactly.
It was a horrendous season.
A hell of a season. All right, George. We will be back
Steve.
again soon. Take care, mate. Have a good weekend.
Okay. I've got another one ready.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.